Chelsea suffered a devastating defeat to one of the worst Manchester United sides we've seen in recent memory, but it wasn't the result that was so disappointing. It was instead the way it happened, and I'm not talking about the red card. Instead, I'm talking about the performance of this man, Enzo Maresca, who in my opinion got this game completely wrong. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at that red card, the mistakes that Enzo Maresca made, and what he could have changed and done differently to give Chelsea a fighting chance. Before we talk about Enzo Maresca and the possible mistakes that he might have made, we need to talk about the pivotal moment that happened early on in this game, and I am of course talking about that red card to Robert Sanchez. A lot of people have been criticising Sanchez, Enzo Maresca being one of them, stating that he really should have done something different, but I'd actually like us to look a little bit deeper, because there was a fundamental issue with the way that Chelsea wanted to prevent Manchester United from building from the back, and the way that they utilised their pressing system. So you have your Chelsea players here. You've got Estevao pushing on to De Ligt. You've got Joao Pedro pressurising the goalkeeper who's looking to go long. You've got Cole Palmer onto Casemiro. Now this all looks fine initially until we forward it on just a touch, and then some things start to become really apparent. So this is the Manchester United deep midfielder in Casemiro. He's being marked by Palmer, and this is Bruno Fernandes being marked by Enzo Fernandez. Initially, nothing is wrong, but until you look down here. Marco Correa is in absolute no man's land. This is because he's wanted to go up and press Mazraoui to try and pen Manchester United in to this half of the pitch, pushing really high and making sure they're really aggressive. The problem that this has is the knock-on effect that it has for Moises Caicedo. Instead of playing here next to Ahmad to be able to hold on to that midfield position, he's dropped back into something of a left-back role. This is really problematic, because it means that he's now pushing up against Mbeumo. Now, while a lot of Chelsea people will think that Mbeumo and Caicedo is fine and Caicedo can handle himself, that is true, but this positioning is not normal for him. This isn't great. And once you have Zekko winning their header here and having a knock-on, it really does have some major problems. So fundamentally, there was a problem with the way Chelsea's pressing structure worked. Obviously, the ball gets flicked on by Zekko, it's a good header, and it goes over towards Mbeumo. Caicedo could be arguably napping at this point. He doesn't hold his line necessarily well enough, and obviously it goes to Mbeumo. Now from this point, of course, Sanchez should just let the play run. Of course, he should let the goal in rather than committing that red card offence. But my point here is there is something far deeper in the way that Chelsea wanted to press this Manchester United side and the way that they wanted to try and get the ball back rather than just looking at the goalkeeper. But it's once you're faced with that really challenging moment that you must react, and you must react accordingly. You must change the game back into your favour somehow. And it's that reaction that I think Enzo Maresca got completely wrong. So initially, you had Robert Sanchez obviously getting sent off. In place of that, to bring on another goalkeeper, Estevao leaves the pitch. Jorgensen comes on, Neto goes over to the left, Palmer goes more or less over to the right, and Chelsea look like this. This, I think, would have been a suitable way to really look to go forwards, especially early on in that first half. But what Enzo Maresca did, I believe, was panic. He decided to bring on another defender immediately with Jorgensen, and that created Chelsea's back five. And what this did was really lay down the dominoes for the problematic effects that would later on progress in that first half, and we'll take a look at that first goal a little bit later. But what this really did was it compounded the way that Chelsea needed to go forwards, and it really hampered the way that they wanted to go forwards. It hamstrung them. To compound this even further, once that first goal goes in, he removes Cole Palmer. Now, there might have been some kind of injury concern, but if you're taking off Palmer within 18 minutes of the game, I'm arguing that he probably shouldn't have started. Santos comes on and he does okay, but it means that Chelsea look like this, a 5-3-1 essentially. Looking to try to go forwards and get back into the game, they didn't have any way of going forwards, and it meant that when they dropped back into more of a defensive position because of the extra man advantage that Man United had, you had no way to get out. No pace, no drive, there was no Gittins, there was no Garnacho, there was no outlet to be able to look towards, apart from a Joao Pedro that when he drops, you're expecting him to run essentially half the pitch to try and create anything. And obviously at that point, he was then smothered by those Man United players and preventing from getting anywhere near that goal. It simply was tactically not good enough. And it was actually the implementation of that back five system and how uncomfortable Chelsea looked to be playing it that led to Manchester United's breakthrough in the first place. Here you've got Chelsea's back five system, you've got Chalobah being a little bit more aggressive, Tosin is now on the pitch, and you've got Marco Correa as the left wing back on that far side. But the midfield just looked a little bit just out of sorts. They looked a little bit chaotic. They didn't necessarily know who to pick up, where to go, and it just all looked a little bit messy. The ball gets played over towards their right hand side, and this is where the back five system really starts to compound Chelsea's problems, because as the ball goes out to the right hand side and the ball gets whipped back in, look at how narrow Reece James is, and we need to remember that he's currently the right wing back. Now, normally for a right back position, this is really good. You're on that far post. You're at the back post. You're ready to clear anything. But you're forgetting about the player behind you. You're forgetting about the idea of Patrick Dorgu, who is lurking out towards the back of that box. And it's after this ball gets whipped in that you essentially have two free players ready to get that header on. The moment that gets played back across goal, it is always going to be chaotic. It's always going to be danger. And this is because of how unfamiliar Reece James was with playing as a right wing back in that system. It just hasn't happened for such a long period of time. I know Chelsea were brilliant utilising that back three, that back five system for so long, so many years ago, but they're just not familiar. They didn't look comfortable. And as that ball comes back over, you've got Bruno Fernandes ready to run onto it. Here you can see him right here, just on the line of offside, ready to tap it in. But it was through actually implementing that system that Chelsea looked so uncomfortable, and that's where that breakthrough came from. And although Chelsea got back into the game later on down the line due to another red card, they never really looked like scoring because of how this system and the substitutions that Enzo Maresca made really hamstrung them. So what could he have done differently? What could Enzo Maresca have changed to turn Chelsea's fortunes around, or at the very least, give them a fighting chance in this game? Well, we already know that Robert Sanchez gets sent off, and we know that Estevao is probably the more likely option to remove from the pitch. It's then at that point that you move Palmer over to that right-hand side, Neto over to that left, and you've got Joao Pedro up front. I mentioned a little bit earlier that I was happy with what this system looked like, and although there was a missing piece in the centre of the park, it wasn't something you weren't able to fix. And that's exactly what we're going to take a look at doing right now. We need to put into context the opposition that Chelsea are playing against, and the way that you look to really capitalise on their weaknesses and their deficiencies. Those deficiencies and weaknesses are in the centre of the park, and that's exactly what Chelsea should have looked towards to try to control the game. The numbers advantage and the numerical advantage in the centre of the pitch, something that Enzo Maresca always looked towards. But as I said earlier, I think he panicked. I think he overthought this situation and almost talked himself out of his principles of play and the way that he wanted to go forward. Instead, if you were to utilise Cole Palmer, Neto and Pedro in the correct manner, in the correct way, you can isolate these two Manchester United midfield players and really capitalise upon the number disadvantages they have in the centre of the park. To do this, you could utilise Cole Palmer moving into a more central role, dropping Joao Pedro back into something of an attacking midfielder. We know it's a position that he likes to play, almost that hybrid centre-forward striker role. In having him drop next to Palmer as Palmer moves in field, pushing Reece James that little bit further forwards, you've got the width from James that we've seen be really well utilised with the crosses that he has into the box in that second half. You've got Palmer operating in that half space behind the likes of a Bruno Fernandes or a Casemiro, and you've got Joao Pedro dropping into that pocket of space. This is also really compounded by the fact that Manchester United had a player sent off as well, so they really could have evened the game up and then played their way to go forwards. But unfortunately, Enzo Maresca already tied their hands behind their own backs. And then once you start to move that round, you've got that balance of play. You've got that three at the back being able to push forwards. You've got that midfield double pivot in Caicedo and Enzo to be able to push balls through into that front four almost. And then it's about those runs. Neto on that left, Reece James on that right, Palmer and Pedro linking up together to be able to go forwards. And now you're isolating and taking that space and overloading certain situations against this poor Manchester United side. This is how I believe they should have looked and how I believe they should have gone forwards. But my question to you guys is, what would you have changed? What would you have altered in Enzo Maresca's position to turn the game around for Chelsea? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.